It's Nigeria.
I've been expecting you.
Wait, you're all missing.
It is always hungry. We must feed it. Who are you?
This is my domain.
Back to the Nerdy Grail, and another week has passed, and this is the 5th episode now that has just dropped for Doctor Who Season 2. So we're already 5 episodes deep into this series. The finale is incoming, people. We're finally going to get some mysteries solved. And this episode had a fairly interesting premise and a couple of shock reveals that I was not expecting, but I did have some suspicions in my mind. So this episode, last week we had Season 2, Episode 4, Lucky Day. This week, it's Doctor Who Season 2, Episode 5, titled The Story and the Engine. And there was a lot of theories that was going around about this story at the time, whether it was going to be like a God episode, whether we were going to get like the return of... I believe we saw, because we saw a giant spider in a web in the trailer, people were thinking about like the Rachnos or the Metabilis spiders or something along those lines. You know us Doctor Who fans, we like to do some wacky and wild predictions. None of those turned out to be true, but we did have a few surprises thrown our way in this episode. And this episode, to be fair, it was a fairly decent episode, but I am going to come out the gate now and let you know before I do my number system at the end, where I do my little out of 10 ranking, that this wasn't my favourite episode of the series. That still is Lux. Lux is still holding strong for me, but this was a pretty alright episode, to be fair. So all I'm going to do is just going to go over like my positives and negatives of the episode and briefly go over elements of the plot for you today and say some of the surprise reveals that we got in this episode. So obviously this story, well, we get a bit more of a cold open again, which I like it when they do cold opens, where we're taken inside this barbershop in Lagos, Nigeria, which is where this story takes place, where there's a customer who's getting his hair cut and he's telling this really nice and beautiful story, and it cuts to this almost like projector tapestry looking thing where it is showing like a hand-drawn version of the story that he's telling, and it's a really beautifully done, but we find out that it's actually powering something, but we don't know what it's powering yet. And they do this beautiful little transition into the Doctor Who theme tune where that is being shown on the projector tapestry thing as well, which I was speaking to my fiancée at the time about it and we thought it was interesting. Cuts to the Doctor, obviously, in the TARDIS with Belinda. Again, they're trying to go to another location using the Vindicator in order to get themselves back to 2025. The Doctor comes up with an idea saying he knows a place that's perfect and it will help power the Vindicator up a lot more because it's brilliant for communication systems and this, that and the other. So he suggests going to Lagos, Nigeria, where he knows somebody that he used to go to. It's a barbershop where he'd get his hair cut and tell stories, and a place where he felt safe in his new body. So this episode really delves into the fact that the Doctor obviously now has changed and he feels more accepted this time around. And it's really, really interesting. So I'm glad they delve into that, because the whole cast, apart from Mrs. Flood, who does do a cameo in this episode, but one of the shortest and most random cameos of the series. You know, the whole cast are played by black actors and actresses, which is really, really nice. And I think it works really, really well for the story and for the plot threads that they're trying to portray in the story. I think it's done really well. And they're all brilliant. All the side characters are really interesting, although obviously when the Doctor arrives in Nigeria, he goes out on his own. Belinda stays in the TARDIS to give him a moment, and he stumbles across the barbershop, but then the door locks, and we find out for the rest of the episode, we are trapped in this barbershop, which is kidnapping people, transporting them to this new dimension, because we find out that the barbershop is actually riding on the back of a giant spider, which is crawling upon a web, heading somewhere. Where that is, we don't necessarily know yet, but it's being powered by the stories that each of the kidnapped people are telling, and it's powering them, it feeds off it. So this is where people thought in the theories that it was going to be a god of sorts, you know, that gets fed, you know, a bit like how Maestro feeds off stealing music, Toymaker feeds off playing games and kidnapping people, you know, Sutek feeds off death, everything, you know, so it's sort of, we thought it was playing along that, and this would be like, you know, God that feeds off stories, and it makes sense. Obviously, they do use the Doctor as he gets his haircut, and one of his stories seems to like almost overload the machine, and they're like, oh my god, this evil villain known as the Barber is like, oh my goodness, we could use you and to power our machine properly, you know, so they sort of trap the Doctor in. And the Doctor feels betrayed because he finds out that his friend that he'd gone to see had lured the Doctor in because he knew about the Doctor's Time Lord side. He knew he was an alien, knew that he'd have loads of more powerful stories to tell. And so the Doctor felt a bit betrayed. So there's a nice little bit of conflict that goes on between the Doctor and his friend, which I really, really liked. The Barber was a really creepy villain. He was both antagonist and also then like protagonist towards the end because he does help to save the day along with the Doctor. But it is really, really interesting. But there's also this little assistant character, this woman that walks in halfway through, who's like the assistant to the Barber, and the Doctor recognises her, but doesn't quite know where he recognises her from, but he sort of recognises her face. The Barber eventually reveals himself to be like a culmination of all different gods, even talking about Loki being Loki, the god of mischief, which was really, really interesting. But the Doctor obviously doesn't believe that, and so laughs that off. But when he finally recognises the lady, we get probably one of the most shocking reveals so far this series, if I'm being perfectly honest. Even more of a surprise than obviously Midnight coming back and having a sequel with the Entity. I sort of slightly predicted it to a degree because the Doctor said towards the start with Belinda that he's visited there before and he's more accepted in the way he looks now than he did before. So I was thinking to myself, well, who could this possibly be? We've only got a couple of candidates this could be. And in the back of my mind, and this is a spoiler if you've not seen the episode yet, in the back of my mind, I was thinking about Jo Martin's fugitive Doctor. She did crop into my mind. And when the Doctor was having a conversation with the mysterious lady at this point, they sort of pan the shot around. So it's Ncuti talking to her. And then when you look in the opposite side, Jo Martin's fugitive Doctor magically appears and you see Jo Martin, and Jo Martin has a line saying, "I was a fugitive back then," because we find out that this was a person that the Doctor had gone back to see and had promised to take her with him but couldn't for reasons. And so the Doctor reveals it was because he was a fugitive back then and wasn't allowed to meddle and was trying to escape, this, that and the other. So we got a cameo from the fugitive Doctor, played by Jo Martin yet again. So I'm trying to wonder, will Jo Martin return? Because that was a very short cameo, and it would feel weird if that was the only time we saw Jo Martin's fugitive Doctor, if I'm perfectly honest. But obviously, once everyone's finally had enough now of all the twisted games that the Barber's playing, because every time they get their hair cut by these mysterious, like razor blade, their hair magically grows back, and it's almost like hurts them and stresses them out and like de-energizes them. So obviously they can only do it for so long. But the Doctor manages to convince the woman to help, and she does, and she like carves a pattern on his head of this maze to get to the heart or the engine of what's feeding this barbershop and feeding this creature. And the Doctor and Belinda, who's stumbled now into the barbershop herself, go through this maze, find the heart, and the Doctor connects himself to the engine and starts telling his story. He uses 4 words, you know, I'm born, I die. And so it tells the whole story of his life. So we get like nice little flashbacks to previous Doctors. You see like Colin Baker, Tom Baker, David Tennant, Matt Smith. You see all the other Doctors, different lines from different previous stories. And it is really, really good. You know, a little bit of a trip down memory lane telling the story of his life. And it overpowers the machine and then destroys it. And obviously they all manage to escape, even the Barber, who gets forgiven by the end. And then the Doctor and Belinda go back off on their travels. And it's a nice little down-to-earth story about myth, about legend, about history. You know, it is really, really good. And I thought it was a decent episode. Not the best episode, if I'm being perfectly honest. I felt it was very slow-paced at times. And obviously, a story that's focusing on stories means it's going to be long-winded in telling those stories. But yeah, overall, it was okay. What would I rate it out of 10 compared to previous stories? If I'm honest, I would probably also put this on par for me with Lucky Day and say 6.5 out of 10, because I did enjoy it, but not as much as stories like The Well or Lux or even Robot Revolution. So I'd probably say it's joint weakest for me, but it's still an okay story at 6.5. But that is going to be it for my short little review on the story and the engine. I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, please like it by giving it a thumbs up and comment down below your thoughts on the story and the engine. and subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is Nerdy Grail signing off. I hope you've had an amazing day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye for now, everyone.